My name is Mercer Smith, and I'm the VP of CX Insights and Community at PartnerHero, a business process outsourcing company.
In your blog post, which we will sort of put up along with this video, you sort of talk about why most companies don't actually think in the early stages of setting up their CX strategy about integrating data into that picture. What's been your sort of experience with that, and why are you sort of advocating for them to do that?
It's so easy in the early days to think about all of the other things that you need to prioritize, right? Like it feels like you're constantly moving from fire to fire when you're trying to set up a CX strategy at the very beginning. And because of that, data is usually something that gets kicked down the road, right? You're like, oh, we'll worry about it when we're a little bit bigger. We'll worry about it when we have more team members. But that is actually part of the reason why we should prioritize data right at the start. The longer that you wait to set it up, the harder it is, the more backdated historical data you need to add in, the more technical debt you need to work through. Setting up data right from the start both negates those future issues of needing to work against all of your historical data, and it gives you empowerment to make better decisions as you move through setting up your CX strategy. So things like staffing and which tools to use and things like that can be backed up by data instead of by gut feeling.
You also sort of mentioned that some of the metrics that we think of as very sort of fundamental and important CX metrics like CSAT and CES are not always enough. So when you sort of talk about data, what exactly do you mean? What should companies be measuring or looking to measure?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think CSAT, customer effort score, NPS are all really good baseline metrics, but ultimately they're going to be stronger and more powerful when they're correlated with other metrics. So for instance, you could use cross-functional metrics like retention data or churn data. You could also use things like time to first response. You could use engagement on your marketing sites or on your social media profiles. All of those things are going to be great when put in conjunction with those base level CX metrics. So rather than using one at a time or just assuming that like, oh, my CSAT is good, that must mean that my strategy is A-okay, double checking it or correlating it with other metrics can help to give you a broader picture of how CX is working within your company's ecosystem.
So my next question, I guess, then would be, for companies looking to do this for the first time, do you have any sort of tips and tricks that you would recommend or things that they should keep in mind? Any common pitfalls that you see happening with this sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest pitfall is just kicking it down the road, right? So people oftentimes just assume like, oh, we'll just use the innate reporting, or we'll take a look at like our Twitter stats and we'll take a look at our help desk stats and kind of not pulling it together into one solid place. So my biggest advice would be, even if you just make it something scrappy like a Google Sheet or an Airtable, having some place where all of those metrics are kind of put into one zone so you have historical tracking of it as you move along in your CX strategy, that's going to be a best practice. And you can even do that without having any engineering help. So if you're like a one-man support team or a one-person support team, or very small, you can still do some of these best practices with data just by using a lower lift tool. Similarly, things like Full View and other programs that have really built-in integrations to kind of pull data and share data should be something that's prioritized when you're thinking about your CX strategy and the tooling that you're going to use to get there.
You sort of also talk about how this is all leading up to creating sort of an integrated customer profile. That's something that we talk a lot about at Full View. Can you sort of speak to that a little bit, why that's so important for businesses to be creating these integrated customer profiles so it's not just sort of siloed data across many different functions?
For sure. So to create the best customer experience, you want the customer to feel like working with your company is effortless, right? They should be able to go to your blog and you already know about what they care about and you're already surfacing content that's important to them. They should be able to go into your product if you're a SaaS product, or into your stores if you're a physical brick and mortar business. And you should have things suggested for them that they care about or that they've shown interest in. Having an integrated customer profile and having data aggregated across all of your functions enables you to do this pretty straightforward and easily, rather than having to kind of like back engineer it and retroactively figure out what that should look like once you're farther down the road.